There was a diner your family used to stop at on road trips. It had a name like Star or Liberty or Jimmy's, spelled out in neon cursive that buzzed a little in the rain. The booths were vinyl, patched in one corner with silver tape. The coffee came in a thick ceramic mug that felt heavier than it looked, and when the waitress refilled it, she didn't ask. She just tilted the glass pot and poured, and the steam rose up past the handwritten specials board propped near the register. That diner closed sometime between 1987 and 2005. Nobody warned you. One summer you drove past the exit and the sign was dark, and a few years later the building was a nail salon or nothing at all. Just a pad of cracked asphalt with grass pushing through. You didn't know, on your last visit, that it was going to be your last visit. And you didn't know, pulling out of that gravel lot, what exactly was disappearing off that menu. Today, I want to tell you, not the dishes that got banned, not the ones health inspectors pulled for regulation reasons. I want to tell you about the dishes we simply lost, the ones that slipped quietly out of American life because tastes shifted, and the places that made them right went dark, one by one, across a couple of decades. These are the plates our grandparents ordered without looking at the menu, and we never got to order at all, because by the time we were old enough to know what we wanted, the cook had already moved on. To understand what we lost, you have to understand what the American diner actually was. It was a specific American invention, born on a specific street in 1872. The city was Providence, Rhode Island, and the man was Walter Scott, who loaded sandwiches, boiled eggs, pie, and coffee into a horse-drawn wagon and parked it outside the offices of the Providence Journal to feed the pressmen on the night shift. Every chrome-sided railcar-shaped building you've ever walked into, every stool bolted to a tile floor, descends directly from Walter Scott's wagon. By 1905, a builder named Patrick Tierney had started manufacturing these wagons as prefabricated buildings you could ship on a flat car and drop onto a lot overnight. Paterson, New Jersey, became the manufacturing capital. The Silver Diner, the Worcester Lunch Car Company, Jerry O'Mahony Incorporated. These were not restaurant brands. They were factories that built the buildings. The truck arrived, the crane lifted it onto the foundation, and by next Tuesday, you were serving meatloaf. The peak was the late 1940s through about 1965. Roughly 6,000 diners, at the high water mark, concentrated in the Northeast and industrial Midwest, but reaching down into the South and out into the plains, wherever a highway ran. They were where truckers ate, where cops ate between shifts, where teenagers came after the movie. The cooks who ran those grills, most of them immigrants, Greek in the Northeast, Italian in New Jersey, Polish and Hungarian, in the Midwest, brought their own instincts to the short-order menu. That fusion, immigrant hands making American comfort food for working-class Americans at 3 in the morning, is what produced the dishes I'm about to tell you about. And when the diners started closing, those dishes went with them. Not instantly, gradually, the way a field turns back into woods. Here's the first one. Chicken croquettes. If you were born before about 1970, the word croquette probably calls up something specific. A little torpedo, or sometimes a flattened puck, of seasoned chicken bound in a thick bechamel cream, rolled in breadcrumbs and deep-fried to a color somewhere between gold and mahogany. You cut into it with the side of your fork, and the crust gave way with that particular snap, and inside was almost pudding-soft, rich with butter and flour and milk and finely shredded meat from yesterday's roasted chicken. It came with a scoop of mashed potatoes, a ladle of yellow gravy, peas on the side, and a tiny crimped paper cup of cranberry sauce. Croquettes were on every diner menu from roughly 1920 to 1980. They were thrift food, elevated, and they used up every scrap of yesterday's bird. They were the proof that a short-order cook could be a real cook, because a croquette that held together and crisped evenly was a small triumph you produced dozens of times a shift. And then, sometime in the 1980s, they disappeared. The kind of cook who could mix bechamel by feel was retiring. Diners started sourcing frozen chicken tenders from food service suppliers, and the customer who used to order croquettes was ordering the tender now. By 1995, you couldn't find a chicken croquette unless the diner was run by someone's 90-year-old grandmother. You still can't. Now pause for a second. I want you to picture something. The counter lip of a classic diner was stainless steel, and it ran the length of the room, and it was warm. Not hot, just warm, because the dish return window was right behind it, and the clean plates stacked up steaming. If you put your forearm on that counter in January, it felt like a small animal was warming your sleeve. That detail doesn't exist anywhere else in American life. Second dish, the hot beef sandwich. Open face, 2 slices of soft white bread laid flat on the plate. A mound of shaved roast beef piled on top, still pink in the middle, cooked that morning in a covered pan with onions. A scoop of mashed potatoes on the side. Brown gravy ladled over everything, so that it pooled around the potatoes and soaked into the bread and glistened on the beef with that specific gravy sheen. The one where the surface catches the fluorescent light and holds it. You ate it with a fork, never a knife, because the bread underneath had softened to the consistency of pudding. This was a 12 o'clock lunch all over the Midwest and Great Plains, particularly in Minnesota and the Dakotas and Iowa, where it was sometimes just called the hot beef or the beef commercial. Truck stops served it. Church basements served it at funerals. It required, to be done right, actual roasted beef, actual gravy made from actual drippings, and actual mashed potatoes. When diners started using frozen sliced beef in a pouch and gravy mix from a can, the dish hollowed out. People stopped ordering it. The few places that still serve it right are on county highways with gravel parking lots and handwritten signs, and they are fewer every year. Third, the Turkey Manhattan. Same idea as the hot beef, but with turkey. 2 slices of white bread, a pile of sliced roasted turkey, mashed, potatoes, turkey gravy ladled over the whole thing. Sometimes a scoop of stuffing, sometimes a spoon of cranberry. It was Thanksgiving on a plate, year-round, and it existed because a diner that roasted a couple of 20-pound turkeys every Monday had the meat to use all week. The Turkey Manhattan has been almost completely replaced by the Turkey Club sandwich. A club is a stack. A Manhattan is a pool. The Manhattan gave you the feeling of Thanksgiving dinner alone, on a counter stool in December, reading a newspaper somebody had left behind. That feeling is not on the menu anymore. Fourth, Yankee pot roast. And I want to be careful here because I know what you're thinking. Pot roast is still around. Yes and no. What's still around is the gastropub braise, the one where the chef seared the meat in a hot skillet, deglazed with red wine, added rosemary and thyme, and slow-cooked it in a Dutch oven. That's not Yankee pot roast. Yankee pot roast was humbler. A chuck roast, seared briefly in bacon fat, then simmered. Not braised, just simmered at the barest blip of a boil in water or weak beef stock, with onions, carrots, and peeled potatoes right in the pot for most of an afternoon, until the meat shredded under a fork and the broth turned into a pale, almost creamy gravy from the starch of the potatoes. No wine, no herbs beyond maybe a bay leaf. Salt and pepper and thyme. That was it. It tasted like Sunday at your grandmother's house. And it's largely gone because the modern palate finds it under-seasoned, and the modern kitchen doesn't have 4 hours of simmer time on a flat top. What we call pot roast today is richer, winier, herbier, and lonelier for its lack of the original's quiet self-confidence. Fifth, liver and onions. I can hear you wincing, I know, but stay with me. Once upon a time, liver and onions was on virtually every American diner menu, and people ordered it. Not reluctantly, not for their iron, but because they liked it. Thin slices of beef liver, dredged in seasoned flour, cooked fast in butter with a mountain of caramelized yellow onions, served with mashed potatoes and a pool of pan juices. When it was done right, the liver was faintly pink inside, tender, almost silky, with the iron tang muted by the butter and the long-cooked sweetness of the onions. When it was done wrong, it was an eraser. Doing it right takes instinct, because liver goes from perfect to gray in about 45 seconds, and the cooks who had that instinct are mostly gone. A generation raised on chicken nuggets decided awful was disgusting. Today you can find liver and onions in maybe 1% of the diners that still exist, and half of those serve it overcooked. Pause. The handwritten specials board. Did you ever notice they always used colored chalk? Red for Fridays sometimes, because fish. Green for vegetables. The handwriting was never great. There were almost always misspellings. Goulash, manicotti, sausage. Nobody minded. The misspellings were proof a human being had written it, too busy running the diner to care about spelling. That was part of the trust. Sixth, fried clam strips, not Ipswich whole-belly clams, which are their own sacred thing and still exist in certain New England shacks, but the humbler strip. A strip clam is the foot of the sea clam, cut lengthwise into a ribbon, battered and deep-fried. Howard Johnson's put the fried clam strip on the American map in the 1930s and 40s, and it spread from there into diners all up and down the eastern seaboard and inland as far as Ohio. You got a paper-lined basket with a paper cup of tartar sauce and a lemon wedge and French fries, and they cost less than a burger. The strip was chewy at the ends and tender in the middle, with just enough batter to catch the frying oil. The flavor was specific, briny, a little sweet, unmistakable. Today, Howard Johnson's is extinct, and most diners source frozen popcorn shrimp instead. The strip clam is something you have to drive to Massachusetts to find, and even then, you have to ask. Seventh, chicken pot pie, made with real homemade crust. Not the frozen Swanson one. I mean the one that came out of the diner oven in its own white ceramic casserole dish with little ears for handles, blistering hot. The crust on top a shade of brown you can only get from butter and patience, the filling underneath a rolling yellow lava of chicken, carrots, peas, pearl onions, celery, and a cream gravy reduced over a low burner for an hour. You always waited too little and burned the roof of your mouth. In the 1990s, the frozen pot pie became so ubiquitous that the homemade one seemed redundant. But they were not the same thing. A homemade pot pie has a crust that flakes under your fork and a filling that actually tastes like poultry. The frozen one tastes like the idea of poultry. Eighth, creamed chipped beef on toast. Thin sliced dried beef, the salty, lacquer red kind that came in a little glass jar, torn into bits and stirred into a rich white bechamel cream sauce, spiked, with black pepper, ladled over 2 pieces of white toast cut in triangles, the sauce dripping down the sides. Pennsylvania Dutch diners kept it alive the longest. It was cheap, filling, salty, and strange, because dried beef was an acquired flavor, not quite like any other meat. And it has largely vanished from menus because the younger generations didn't grow up on it, and without demand, the jar of dried beef at the grocery store got smaller, moved to the back, then disappeared, and the whole circuit broke. Ninth, the breakfast pig in a blanket. I want to be specific because there are 2 dishes with this name. The cocktail version, little hot dogs wrapped in crescent roll dough, is still alive at every holiday party in America. But the breakfast version is what I want to honor. A breakfast pig in a blanket was a whole breakfast sausage link, fat and brown from the griddle, rolled up inside a thin buttermilk pancake. You poured maple syrup over the whole thing and ate it with a fork and knife. It was a perfect engineering solution to the problem of eating sausage and pancakes in the same bite, which is what everyone wanted anyway. It was cheap and popular. And then, somewhere around the early 2000s, it became unnoticed. And now you can't find it on 50 menus out of 100 where it used to be a lock. Pattern interrupt, the ceramic coffee mug, thick-walled, stubby-handled, usually white, or ivory, sometimes with the name of the diner printed on the side in one color. Weighed about 3/4 of a pound, empty. Kept coffee hot longer than any modern cup. And when the waitress refilled it, the weight in your hand shifted in a particular way, a little heavier, a little warmer, and you didn't have to say thank you because she'd already moved down the counter to the next cup. That whole rhythm is gone from most of American breakfast. 10th, warm rice pudding with raisins and cinnamon, served in a small, thick glass bowl that felt like it weighed more than the pudding inside. The pudding itself was pale yellow, slightly jiggly, with plump raisins throughout and a dusting of cinnamon on top, and sometimes a thin skin on the surface. You ate it warm, and it was the exact temperature of comfort. Rice pudding had a long run on diner menus from the 1920s up through the 1980s, and then, quietly, it faded. The few places that still make it are mostly Greek diners in the Northeast, and they are getting rare. Warm rice pudding is a different experience from cold rice pudding. Warm feels like being taken care of. Cold feels like a dairy product. 11th, homemade rhubarb pie. Strawberry rhubarb we still get occasionally because the strawberry softens the cell. But straight rhubarb, that sour-sweet, astringent fruit pie with the thick lattice crust and the red-pink juice bubbling through the slats, was a diner staple from May through August for most of the 20th century. Every diner that had a pie case had a rhubarb pie in it, and you could get a slice warm with a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting down the edges. It's gone from most pie cases now. Rhubarb is considered exotic by people under 40. It isn't. It's just a plant nobody's grandmother grew for them. 12th, the cottage cheese fruit plate. Yes, this one. A scoop of full-fat cottage cheese in the center of a cold plate, surrounded by canned peach halves, canned pear halves, a cluster of maraschino cherries, a ring of pineapple, and sometimes a sprinkle of paprika on top of the cottage cheese, for reasons nobody fully understood. This was the diet plate on every diner menu from 1955 to 1985, the thing a woman ordered when she was watching her figure, the thing a man ordered when his doctor had yelled at him. It was also, and this is the part we forget, genuinely pleasant to eat. The cold cottage cheese against the sweet, syrupy canned fruit was a texture experience modern eating has no equivalent for. The cottage cheese fruit plate is almost completely extinct because cottage cheese fell out of fashion and canned fruit is considered a crime against nature. Even though, for this particular dish, canned fruit was exactly right. 13th, the hot dog and sauerkraut on a potato roll. This was a Northeast diner specialty, especially in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Connecticut. A good, natural casing hot dog, grilled on the flat top until the skin snapped, nestled into a soft potato roll, topped with a generous spoon of warm sauerkraut and a line of spicy brown mustard. No chili, no cheese, none of the dressed-up hot dog nonsense of later decades. Just the dog, the kraut, the mustard, the roll. It cost almost nothing, and it satisfied something deep. Today, the natural casing hot dog is an artisanal product. The potato roll is a specialty item, the sauerkraut is usually jarred and bland, and the whole assembly has become harder to find than it has any right to be. 14th, the fried bologna sandwich. Thick-cut bologna, a quarter-inch thick, scored with an X on both sides so it wouldn't curl. Up in the pan-fried in butter until the edges were crispy and the surface had gone a deep brown. Served on toasted white bread with yellow mustard and sometimes a slice of American cheese melting into the hot meat. A country diner sandwich, an Appalachian sandwich, a Midwestern blue-collar sandwich. A masterpiece of cheap ingredients elevated by heat and butter, still alive in small pockets of Ohio and West Virginia and Kentucky. Mostly gone elsewhere. Bologna got a reputation in the 1990s as a joke food, and the fried bologna sandwich went down with it, unfairly, because when it's made right, it's genuinely satisfying. 15th, the Boiled Dinner Wednesday Special. A New England thing primarily. Corned beef, or sometimes ham, simmered in a big pot, with cabbage, carrots, potatoes, and turnips, served with horseradish and a slice of rye bread. Wednesday was the day because it was the midweek low-energy day when diner owners wanted a dish that cooked itself in one pot and fed a crowd. You got a wide, shallow bowl with the broth pooling at the bottom, and the meat and vegetables piled up. Boiled dinner has been replaced almost entirely by the St. Patrick's Day once-a-year corned beef, and as a regular weekday item, it's nearly gone. 16th, Salisbury steak with brown gravy. The handmade version, not the frozen TV dinner version that gave the dish a bad reputation for an entire generation. In the diner, Salisbury steak was made fresh, a patty of ground beef mixed with onion, breadcrumbs, egg, salt, and pepper, shaped into an oval, pan-seared, and finished in a thick brown mushroom gravy made from the pan drippings, served with mashed potatoes or egg noodles, a scoop of peas or corn, and a dinner roll. The tragedy is that the frozen version was so bad that the dish became synonymous with it, and the real one died of guilt by association. If you ever see it handmade on a diner menu, order it. 17th, the Hungarian goulash plate. This showed up heavily in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, anywhere there had been Hungarian immigration. Cubes of beef, slow-simmered with onions, sweet paprika, and a little tomato, served over wide egg noodles with a dollop of sour cream. Not the stroganoff variant, real goulash, beefier and sweeter and redder. A diner that had a Hungarian cook always had goulash on the menu, and when the Hungarian cook retired, the goulash left with him. There are maybe a dozen diners in America that still make it from scratch. 18th, the chili cheese omelet. 3 eggs folded over a generous ladle of the diner's house chili and a handful of shredded cheddar served with hash browns and toast. The chili soaked into the eggs, the cheese melted into the chili, The whole plate a glorious mess of red and yellow and orange. A breakfast specialty of the Southwest and Midwest, the kind of thing truckers ordered at 4 in the morning. It's gone from most menus because lighter breakfast trends pushed it out. Bring it back, 19th, the patty melt. This one technically still exists, but I'm including it because it's rarely done right anymore. A patty melt, properly made, is a thin beef patty, griddled, with caramelized onions and Swiss cheese, pressed between 2 slices of rye bread, buttered and griddled until dark and crisp. The cheese has to melt all the way through. The onions have to be caramelized, not sautéed. The rye has to be dark-seeded rye. When you get all of those right, a patty melt is one of the great American sandwiches. When anyone is wrong, it's a sad cheeseburger on bad bread. Most diners today serve the sad version. 20th, coconut cream pie with homemade crust. Pale yellow custard filling thick with real coconut shavings, piled high with fresh whipped cream. Toasted coconut sprinkled on top, all of it sitting in a crust made that morning by hand with butter and flour and cold water and patience. This pie, when it's right, is one of the reasons diners existed. It is almost entirely gone. The version you get now is a commercial frozen pie with whipped topping from a tub. The homemade version was made because a pastry-minded cook was proud of her pies, and when she retired, her pies retired with her. So, here we are at the end of the counter. The specials board has been wiped down. The coffee pot is almost empty. The last slice of coconut cream is sitting in the case, and the cook is in the back, already counting out his money. I want to tell you something, and I want to say it gently. The diner closed. The cook moved on. The neon sign got taken down and sold to a collector in Ohio, or thrown in a dumpster, or left to rust in a field behind someone's barn. The booths got pulled out. The chrome counter got scrapped for metal. The ceramic mugs got sold in lots of a dozen at estate sales. The building became something else, or it became nothing. That is the truth, and there's no sweetening it. But I also want to tell you this. These dishes are not entirely lost. They exist still in small rooms, in old towns, on county highways, in the back booths of places that have not yet closed. There is a woman somewhere in Ohio who still makes chicken croquettes the way her mother made them, and she sells them for $8 on Tuesdays to the people who know. There's a diner in rural Minnesota that still serves the hot beef sandwich with real gravy from real drippings, and the cook is 71, and he will keep doing it until he can't. There's a Greek diner in New Jersey where the rice pudding is served warm in a heavy glass bowl with a dusting of cinnamon, exactly the way it was served in 1962. There is an Amish kitchen in Pennsylvania where the rhubarb pie comes out of the oven every Thursday in May. If you are willing to drive, if you are willing to ask, if you are willing to sit at a counter where nobody knows your name and order something your grandfather would have recognized, these dishes still exist. They are not coming back to the places that lost them. They never do. But they are not extinct. They are simply harder to find, and they require, of the people who want them, a little more effort than pulling off an interstate. So if you drive past a diner next weekend, a real one, with a crooked neon sign and a gravel parking lot and a handwritten specials board in the window, pull in, order the croquettes, order the pot pie, order the rice pudding for dessert, tip well, talk to the cook, ask him how long he's been there. Because the next time you drive past, the sign might be dark, and there will be no warning, and the only thing left of that place will be the memory of a meal you were lucky enough to eat while it was still possible. That's how this works. That's how it has always worked. The dishes are still here. For now. Go find them.